Chapter 10. John had little time during the rest of the short winter afternoon to think about the reappearance of the satchel. It must have been by pure chance that the man on the receiving ship had bundled it up with his clothes, before Mr. Creech had come looking for it. But why had Mr. Creech gone to so much trouble to get hold of a shabby old leather satchel? There was nothing in it, after all, a sorry muddle of dog-eared papers. There must be some deed or other in there, thought John, that father overlooked. No, it couldn't be. But what if it was something that showed what a cheat Mr. Naismith is? What if it proves that Luxton really is ours after all? I'll look through it as soon as I get the chance. His heart lifted at the thought, but he told himself he was being foolish, and a moment later Mr. Torse called out to him. Mr. Torse was looking through the contents of a gun case, making Jabez squint down the barrel of each musket and check the workings of the flintlocks. "We'd best get you kitted out with your hammock, John, before the day's much older," he said. "Get Kit to take you down to see the purser." "Yes, sir." "Did you ever want to be a drummer boy, young John?" "The army, like," said Jabez. "No," said John, puzzled. "'Cause that's what you'd be saying in the army. It would be yes, sir, this, and yes, sir, that. It's aye, aye, sir, in the Navy." "Aye, aye, sir," echoed the parrot. "He knows." Jabez cocked a loving eye up to the bird, who was sidling backwards and forwards along the lid of a cutlass case. "You listen to Horace. You do what Horace tells you. Won't go far wrong." "Yes, aye, aye, sir," said John. The purser's den was on the orlop deck, down in the deep, dark bowels of the ship. To reach it, John and Kit had to fight their way through the swaying throng of carousing women and sailors in the lower gun decks, scramble down a companionway, and grope their way forward in the semi-darkness of the orlop deck. Short as they both were, even they had to bend down, as the beams overhead were so low. It was quiet down here, apart from the creaking of the ship's timbers as she moved up and down on the water, and the thuds and shouts of the gun deck overhead. The air was thick, and there was a rotten smell of foul water, which made John wrinkle up his nose. He was so busy peering forward into the gloom, trying not to bang his head on the beams, he didn't notice that Kit had stopped and nearly bumped into him. Kit put out a warning hand. Peering over his shoulder, John saw two dim figures standing by a stack full of sacks. "You didn't see anything then?" He stowed his gear away. With a sinking heart, John recognised Mr. Higgins' voice. "No, sir." It was Nate, speaking eagerly, as if anxious to please. He kept his back turned, all sneaky. Him and Mr. Torse's servant, that boy Kit, they was whispering together, like they was hiding something. Whispering, hiding something. They don't even know each other. "Well, maybe they do, sir. Very thick together, they was, and him and Tom Todd too. But they'd all known each other before." The watching boys saw Mr. Higgins' arm go out as he cuffed Nate's head. "Don't be foolish. And don't try to be clever with me. You'll get some pennies if you do as I say. You can keep your ideas to yourself. You open that loose mouth of yours. What was that?" His head jerked up, as if he heard something. He swiveled round, peering into the darkness. Kit and John, in the deep shadows, held their breath. There was a moment's silence. Then the two dim figures moved away behind a partition. "This is what I want you to do," came Mr. Higgins' voice, but the boys could hear no more. It was me they were talking about. I'm sure of it, thought John. It's something to do with the satchel again. If only I could find a corner where I could hide away and look. Kit had gone on ahead, and John had to hurry to keep up with him, before the darkness swallowed him up. Half an hour later, John had been issued with his hammock, and the boys climbed up through the layers of the ship to the deck above. In the daytime, you stow your hammock here, see? Said Kit. He untied the canvas that covered the nets running round the edge of the deck to reveal a wall of tightly packed hammocks. John hardly saw what he was doing. After the stuffy darkness of the lower decks, the fresh air up here was wonderful to breathe. He looked round, almost surprised to see the familiar profile of Edinburgh still there on the horizon, and the huddle of houses round the port of Leith. He'd been transported into another world since he'd come on board the Fearless. It was hard to believe that the old world was still there, unchanged. He noticed for the first time a line of ships, some big warships like the Fearless, others small frigates and cutters, which lay with their sails furled at anchor out in the Firth of Forth. Was one of them the Splendid? Had his father been taken out to her yet? It was horrible to think he was probably a mere mile or so away, yet far, far out of reach. He looked down over the side of the ship. Small boats were crowding alongside, the people in them shouting up to those on the deck above. Men and women were climbing on and off the ship, and barges full of supplies being lifted on board with ropes and winches. If I could get down there without being seen, and hide in one of those boats, I could get ashore, thought John. He was almost ready to try it, his feet itching for the feel of solid ground under them. But almost at once, the urge passed. Where would he go once he was on land again? Where would his next meal come from? He was aware that Kit was watching him curiously. "We'd best go below again," Kit said. "Mr. Torse doesn't like us going round the ship while we're in port. He doesn't like us seeing all the, women and everything." Reluctantly, John followed him down the nearest hatchway. "Do you like him, Mr. Torse?" Kit shrugged. "Yeah, he's good. Only when he drinks too much grog, then you'll see. He gets angry. Angry? Wild, you'll see." The now familiar space behind the canvas screen appeared to be empty when Kit and John went inside. Except for Nate Claypole, who was kneeling on the floor, with Kit's chest open in front of him, his hand reaching inside. "Hey, what are you doing, rat-face? Get out of my chest!" shouted Kit, darting forwards. Nate jumped up. His eyes shifted guiltily, but he stabbed an accusing forefinger at John. "Ask him. He's a thief, he is. Stole my pocket knife when we were having our dinner. I seen him. Picked it up off the table when no one else was looking. Found it just now, didn't I? We'd hidden it in your chest." "You liar! He's lying!" John could hardly see for the red mist clouding his eyes. He leaped forwards, fist bumped. But Nate had dodged out the way, and John had to catch hold of a low beam to prevent himself from crashing down onto the deck. "Your knife was in your pocket all the time, rat-face," said Kit with disgust. "I saw you put it in there yourself." Tom and Davy had now appeared. "What is it? A fight? Did John punch Nate?" said Tom hopefully. "No, but Nate deserves it," Kit said scornfully. "We caught him. Look him in my chest." Davy made a distressed noise. "It weren't me. I never did. I never looked in your chest, nor nobody's chest, Kit." The others ignored him. "Nate said I'd stolen his pocket knife. He called me a thief." John was panting with indignation. Kit pushed Nate out the way, slammed down the lid of his chest, picked it up, and took it behind the nearest gun, tucking it away under the barrel. "What's this? What's the noise and fuss?" Mr. Higgins' unwelcome face appeared through the gap in the canvas screen. "It's that boy, John Barr," said Nate, his voice high-pitched. "He's a thief, he is. Stole my pocket knife. I found it in Kit's chest where John stowed his baggage. Mr. Higgins stepped further in. Thieving is a very serious matter, he said with grave satisfaction. Thieves get a flogging, and it's no more than what they deserve. Where's the proof? Here, here, said Nate excitedly, holding up his knife. Proof of what? Said Mr. Torse, appearing suddenly. Why, Mr. Higgins, to what do we owe this pleasure? His small frame was stiff with dislike. A matter of discipline, Mr. Torse. This boy here, John Barr, has been accused of stealing. Master Gunner's eyes narrowed. Who by? Nate Claypole. Stealing what? My pocket knife. From the table. At dinner time, said Nate smugly. Witnesses? Rapped out Mr. Torse. Yeah, I saw him, sir, said Kit, poking his head out from behind the gun where he was still crouching. I saw Ratface, Nate, I mean. He put the knife away in his own pocket, and he just pretended to find it in my chest. All spite, sir, just plain spite. Thank you kindly, Mr. Higgins, for your interest in my boy's morals, said Mr. Torse icily. Now, if you'd be so kind as to leave. He indicated the canvas screen with a dismissive gesture. Wait a minute. Mr. Higgins had hooked his thumbs into the buttonholes of his jacket and was standing firm, his feet apart. The father of this boy was accused of theft this very morning by a respectable citizen of Edinburgh within my hearing. It is my belief that John Barr is the son of a notorious criminal, and he himself is harbouring stolen goods. I demand his belongings be searched. The master gunner drew himself up to his full height, so his eyes were on a level with Mr. Higgins's chin. May I remind you, Mr. Higgins, you are on my premises. And may I remind you, Mr. Torse, matters of discipline in this ship come under the boatswain's jurisdiction, and that I am the boatswain's mate. They fall to me. Do I make myself quite clear? They stood in silence, glaring at each other. Please, sir, said Kit, breaking into the silence. I don't mind if you search my chest. John doesn't mind either, do you, John? He dragged the chest out from under the gun, picked it up, and carried it over to the two men. Mr. Higgins bent down and flung it open. John stared into it, his heart in his mouth. What was all this mystery? What was there among his belongings everyone seemed so eager to possess? And if, by some awful chance, there was something incriminating the satchel, and he was branded a thief, the thought of the shame and the punishment that followed made his blood run cold. Mr. Higgins had knelt down and was eagerly throwing John and Kit's few clothes out onto the deck. One pair of canvas trousers, one spare jacket, a neckerchief, one pair of torn breeches, itemised Mr. Torse with awful sarcasm, picking up the garments one by one as Mr. Higgins threw them down. John's mouth had fallen open. There was no sign, anywhere, of the satchel. He looked up and caught Kit's eye. A mischievous grin had crossed Kit's face, but he covered it at once with an air of wondering innocence. Well, said Mr. Higgins at last, rising awkwardly to his feet. Everything seems to be in order. So it does, agreed the master gunner with mock surprise. I'll be off then. Mr. Higgins was already backing uncomfortably towards the canvas screen. There's one more little matter that perhaps I can oblige you with, said Mr. Torse with painful politeness. I believe I heard you explain this morning to Mr. Erskine as how you were short of a servant. Nate Claypole here was assigned to me. I find, after all, you don't suit. I believe you do for you very well. No, Mr. Torst, please, I never meant it. It was all a mistake, said Nate, whose face had gone a sickly green. Mr. Higgins nodded curtly. Thank you, Mr. Torst. You, Nate, get your belongings and come with me.